The scissors made that sickening crunch as they sliced through Harper Fleming's meticulously braided blonde hair during morning roll call. 28 students sat frozen as chunks fell onto her gradebook, while Damon Westbrook smirked like he'd just won the lottery. What happened next would destroy a federal judge's career, expose a decade-old conspiracy, and prove that some teachers don't just educate, they eliminate problems. In exactly 90 seconds, Damon's roundhouse kick to the face would become the most watched school security footage in American history. Every teacher has faced that one student who thinks rules don't apply to them, but how far would you go to protect your dignity? Share your story in the comments because sometimes the quiet ones have the loudest responses. Harper Fleming never imagined her first year at Roosevelt High School would test every principle she'd learned in 8 years of Taekwondo training. At 26, she carried herself with the measured confidence of someone who'd earned her black belt through blood, sweat, and countless hours perfecting techniques that could disable opponents twice her size. The precision she used arranging lab equipment hinted at years of disciplined training, though her colleagues only saw a dedicated biology teacher struggling to make rent on her teacher's salary. Her left hand bore a small scar from sparring if anyone bothered to look. Most days, Harper concealed her athletic build under professional cardigans and sensible flats. Playing the part of an eager educator hoping to secure a tenure-track position, she shared a cramped apartment with her roommate Sarah, splitting grocery bills and dreaming of the day she could afford her own place. Roosevelt High represented her chance to prove herself worthy of permanent employment in a system that chewed up idealistic teachers and spat them out. Damon Westbrook owned Roosevelt High School the way his father, federal judge Marcus Westbrook, owned the courtroom. At 17, Damon had perfected the art of psychological warfare, using his father's judicial influence and his mother's PTA presidency to create an untouchable empire of intimidation. His phone contained screenshots that had ended careers, and the trophy case held more than athletic awards held secrets that could destroy reputations with a single social media post. His crew operated with military precision. Blake Henderson served as the muscle, a linebacker whose family donated millions to the athletic program. Ryan Torres managed their social media operations, creating viral content that humiliated targets while maintaining plausible deniability. Emma Caldwell functioned as their inside informant, recording everything while appearing to support victims. Together, they'd systematically eliminated 3 teachers who dared challenge their authority. Each departure explained away as family emergencies that somehow involved identical resignation letters. Roosevelt High School projected suburban perfection from its manicured lawns to its state-of-the-art facilities. But darkness festered beneath the surface. Principal Janet Hartley had learned to look the other way when certain incidents occurred, especially those involving students whose families contributed generously to school board campaigns. The surveillance system captured everything except what happened in room 237, where the cameras mysteriously malfunctioned whenever Damon's crew needed privacy. 3 teachers had left mid-semester with identical family emergency stories. But Harper Fleming was different. Her methodical nature demanded patterns, and she'd begun noticing inconsistencies in the official narratives. The way conversations stopped when she entered faculty meetings, the nervous glances exchanged when certain names were mentioned, the subtle warnings disguised as friendly advice about being flexible with influential families. What none of them realized was that Harper Fleming had spent her college years competing in Division I track and field while secretly training at Atlanta's most competitive Taekwondo dojos. She'd mastered the art of reading opponents, recognizing tells that preceded attacks, and maintaining perfect calm under pressure. Her grandmother's braiding technique, passed down through 4 generations of strong women, represented more than hairstyle tradition. Each morning's careful weaving reminded Harper of the discipline required to face challenges with dignity and tact. The morning of October 15th began like any other, with students filtering into first-period biology, displaying the usual mixture of teenage exhaustion and social anxiety. Harper organized her materials with characteristic precision, unaware that today would shatter the careful balance she'd maintained between her teaching persona and her warrior training. As she prepared to take attendance, Damon Westbrook entered the classroom carrying professional hairdressing shear snot random school supplies, but expensive tools that suggested premeditation. The way he positioned himself behind her desk, while his crew flanked the exits, created a formation Harper recognized from countless sparring scenarios. This wasn't teenage rebellion or classroom disruption. This was a coordinated attack designed to humiliate her in front of witnesses while maintaining legal deniability. As Emma Caldwell positioned her phone to capture every angle, Harper realized she was about to become the latest victim in a pattern of systematic harassment. But Damon Westbrook had made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed Harper Fleming was just another vulnerable teacher who would crumble under pressure and disappear quietly into the night. Instead, he'd chosen to target someone whose response would transform Roosevelt High School forever. The first test came during Wednesday morning's biology lab, when Harper assigned group projects without favoring Damon's usual crew. She watched him calculate his next move. Recognizing the predatory patience of someone accustomed to methodical destruction of authority figures, the microscope crash wasn't random. It followed a pattern Harper had seen before in her previous school district. Where bullies tested boundaries through escalating accidents, Damon approached the display case with theatrical clumsiness. His movements too precise to be genuinely accidental. 28 students held their breath as expensive equipment scattered across the linoleum floor, creating a symphony of breaking glass that echoed through the suddenly silent classroom. Harper observed Emma filming everything while strategically deleting specific portions that might contradict their narrative later. Butterfingers. Teach, Damon announced with calculated volume, ensuring his voice carried to the students recording on their phones. Hope your job's more secure than your equipment. His smirk conveyed the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for deliberate destruction. The other students shifted uncomfortably, some snickering nervously, while others recognized the psychological warfare unfolding before them. Harper's response demonstrated 8 years of mental conditioning designed to maintain composure under extreme pressure. She calmly retrieved a broom and dustpan, her movements deliberate and controlled. Accidents happen. Damon, you'll stay after class to help replace what you've broken and write a report explaining proper laboratory safety protocols. Her voice carried authority without anger, refusing to provide ammunition for complaints about unprofessional behavior. The room tensed as Damon processed this unexpected response. Previous teachers had either exploded in fury, giving him grounds for accusations of hostile treatment, or cowered in fear, demonstrating their unworthiness for respect. Harper's measured reaction disrupted his established playbook, forcing improvisation that revealed his fundamental inexperience with genuine authority. Strike one, he whispered as he swept glass fragments, the threat barely audible but clearly intended for Harper's ears. His crew exchanged meaningful glances, already planning their next escalation. Blake cracked his knuckles meaningfully, while Ryan documented everything for their eventual campaign against Harper's credibility. The pattern was as predictable as it was effective until now. After class, Harper discovered her Honda Civic with 4 slashed tires in the faculty parking lot. The precision of the cuts suggested someone familiar with disabling vehicles without triggering immediate alarm. She photographed the damage from multiple angles, noting how the vandalism matched similar incidents described in hushed conversations among experienced teachers. The security footage for the parking lot had mysteriously corrupted, according to the apologetic maintenance supervisor, who seemed genuinely confused by the technical malfunction. Principal Hartley's suggestion that Harper be more flexible with certain students carried undertones that confirmed her growing suspicions. The administrative response followed a script designed to protect the school's reputation rather than address systematic harassment. Harper realized she was witnessing institutional corruption that extended far beyond teenage pranks, involving adults who prioritized political relationships over student safety and teacher welfare. That evening, Harper began documenting everything in encrypted recordings stored on multiple cloud services. Her investigative instincts, honed through years of scientific methodology, demanded evidence collection that could withstand legal scrutiny. She researched the previous teacher departures, discovering financial settlements that purchased silence along with resignations. The tire slashing was identical to Miss Prass's. Martinez's incident 3 months ago, down to the specific angle of the cuts and the convenient camera malfunction. The cafeteria incident occurred during Thursday's lunch duty, orchestrated with precision that revealed extensive planning. Blake's accidental collision happened at exactly 12:47 p.m., the same time 3 other incidents had occurred throughout the semester. suggesting coordination beyond coincidence. The full tray of marinara sauce created maximum visual impact when it drenched Harper's white blouse, transforming her professional appearance into something resembling a crime scene. Emma's Instagram livestream captured 200 students laughing at Harper's predicament, while Damon offered theatrical apologies designed to sound sincere on camera. "So clumsy. Maybe teaching isn't your calling," he proclaimed with mock concern, his performance calculated to appear supportive while delivering psychological wounds. The livestream accumulated hundreds of viewers within minutes, creating viral content that could haunt Harper's career indefinitely. Harper's response surprised everyone. Instead of fleeing in embarrassment or demanding administrative intervention, she calmly addressed the assembled students. "Accidents happen," she announced, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "But patterns reveal intentions. I'll be documenting this pattern very carefully." The warning was subtle enough to avoid accusations of threatening students, while clear enough to communicate her awareness of their coordinated campaign. In the teacher's lounge, Miss Rodriguez revealed the systematic nature of the harassment pattern. "Same thing happened to me last year," she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "Différent détail. Identical strategy. They drive out anyone who won't play by their rules." The revelation confirmed Harper's suspicions about institutional corruption extending throughout the administration, with resignation letters pre-written just like two others discovered in forgotten files. Blake's trip had been performed with athletic precision. He'd practiced the movement until it became muscle memory. The coordination required extensive preparation, suggesting these weren't impulsive pranks, but carefully orchestrated psychological operations designed to destroy teaching careers. Harper realized she wasn't fighting teenage bullies, but a sophisticated network of harassment that had operated unchallenged for years. As Thursday evening approached, Harper understood that her choice was simple: retreat like her predecessors, or prepare for escalation that would test every technique she'd mastered in 8 years of martial arts training. The scissors Damon brought to Friday morning's roll call weren't random school supplies, they were professional hairdressing shears worth over $200. Suggesting someone had invested serious money in her humiliation. The calm before the storm felt electric, as Harper arranged her materials for what would become the most famous first-period biology class in Roosevelt High School's history. Friday morning arrived with the crisp autumn air that should have signaled fresh beginnings instead of psychological warfare. Harper Fleming braided her blonde hair with extra care, weaving the intricate pattern her grandmother had taught her as a symbol of strength, passed down through generations of resilient women. She had no way of knowing that this ancestral tradition would soon become the catalyst for a confrontation that would reshape Roosevelt High School forever. Damon Westbrook entered first-period biology, carrying professional hairdressing shears concealed in his backpack, their weight serving as a reminder of the humiliation he planned to inflict. The scissors weren't borrowed school supplies, but expensive tools purchased specifically for this performance, suggesting someone had invested serious money in Harper's destruction. His crew flanked him with military precision. Blake positioning himself near the exit, Ryan preparing his recording equipment, and Emma activating her phone's live stream function. The classroom filled with its usual collection of sleepy teenagers, clutching coffee cups and checking social media before settling into their assigned seats. Most students remained oblivious to the drama about to unfold, but a few noticed the unusual tension crackling between Damon's crew and their typically composed biology teacher. Harper's posture seemed different, somehow more alert, like an athlete preparing for competition rather than a teacher beginning another routine day. As Harper called attendance, her voice maintained its characteristic calm authority, while her peripheral vision tracked Damon's movements. 8 years of Taekwondo training had conditioned her to recognize threatening behavior patterns, and everything about his positioning screamed premeditation. The way he'd claimed the seat directly behind her desk created perfect striking distance, while providing optimal camera angles for Emma's documentation. This wasn't random teenage rebellion, this was a coordinated assault designed for maximum psychological impact and viral distribution. Present. Each student responded as Harper progressed through her roster, the familiar routine creating false normalcy that masked the tension building in the room. When she reached Damon's name, he stood slowly and approached her desk with theatrical confidence, the expensive scissors glinting in the fluorescent lighting. 28 students sensed something momentous approaching. their attention focusing with unusual intensity on the unfolding drama. "Let me help fix your look, Miss Fleming," Damon announced with volume calculated to ensure every phone microphone captured his words clearly. His movement toward Harper's carefully braided hair represented more than physical assault. It was an attack on her dignity, her cultural heritage, and her authority as an educator. The professional shears raised theatrically above her blonde braids created a visual threat that every witness understood instinctively. Harper's response demonstrated years of mental conditioning designed to maintain perfect composure under extreme pressure. "Put the scissors down, Damon," she commanded without turning around, her voice carrying newfound authority that seemed to emanate from somewhere deeper than her usual teaching persona. Her stillness wasn't fear, it was the calculated calm of a predator preparing to eliminate a threat that had finally revealed its true nature. "Make me teach," Damon snarled, his confidence boosted by the audience recording every moment for social media immortality. The challenge represented a point of no return that would determine whether Harper Fleming joined the ranks of defeated educators or transformed into something entirely different. His grip tightened on the scissors as he prepared to sever not just hair but her entire career trajectory. The sickening crunch of professional shears, slicing through 8 inches of meticulously braided blonde hair, echoed through the classroom like a gunshot. Chunks of Harper's ancestral pattern fell onto her gradebook, while students gasped in horror at the casual brutality they'd just witnessed. Emma's live stream exploded with viewers as the footage captured both the assault and Harper's reaction, creating viral content that would soon reach audiences far beyond Roosevelt High School's walls. Harper slowly turned around, her ruined hair creating a defiant halo in the morning, sunlight streaming through the windows. In that moment, 28 students later agreed. Her entire demeanor shifted from mild-mannered educator to something altogether more dangerous. Her posture straightened with athletic precision, her weight shifted to the balls of her feet, and her hands moved into positions that suggested years of combat training suddenly awakening. "Class dismissed," Harper announced with quiet authority that brooked no argument. "Everyone except Damon out. Now." The transformation in her voice carried undertones that made even Blake Henderson hesitate despite his linebacker physique. Students who'd never seen their biology teacher display anything stronger than mild disappointment suddenly recognized they were witnessing something unprecedented in Roosevelt High School's carefully controlled environment. "This is about to get good," Emma whispered to her live stream audience as she positioned her phone for optimal coverage. The viewer count climbed rapidly as word spread through social media networks that something explosive was developing in room 237. Students began crowding the hallway windows, their phones pressed against glass, as they prepared to document whatever happened next between their defeated teacher and their untouchable tormentor. Some students initially refused to leave, unwilling to abandon their recording opportunities or their front row seats to what promised to be legendary content. But Harper's repeated command carried such steel-edged authority that even the most determined onlookers found themselves moving toward the exit. The room gradually emptied until only Harper Fleming and Damon Westbrook remained, facing each other across a space that suddenly felt charged with violent potential. As the door closed behind the last student, Harper began removing her professional cardigan with deliberate precision. The movement revealed athletic shoulders and arms that spoke of years dedicated to physical conditioning rather than academic pursuits alone. Her sensible flats came off next, leaving her barefoot and balanced on the linoleum floor like a fighter preparing for combat in an arena where reputation and career survival hung in the balance. Damon's confidence began wavering as he processed visual evidence that contradicted everything he'd assumed about his mild-mannered target. The woman standing before him bore little resemblance to the submissive educator he'd planned to humiliate into resignation. Her stance suggested someone comfortable with violence. Her movements implied training far beyond anything he'd encountered, and her expression promised consequences he'd never imagined possible. "You can't touch me," he declared with desperate bravado, brandishing the scissors like a talisman that might restore his psychological advantage. "My father will destroy your career if you lay one finger on me." But his voice cracked slightly as Harper stepped closer. Her approach, carrying the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years perfecting techniques designed to neutralize threats, exactly like him. Harper's smile contained no warmth as she prepared to teach Damon Westbrook the most expensive lesson of his privileged life. The transformation was complete. Harper Fleming, mild-mannered biology teacher, had evolved into something entirely different. Years of taekwondo training suddenly visible in every controlled movement. Her destroyed braids framed a face that now radiated the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent countless hours perfecting techniques designed to neutralize opponents twice her size. The fluorescent lights cast dramatic shadows across the empty classroom as student faces pressed against hallway windows, phones recording everything for audiences that would soon span the globe. "I'm going to show you the difference between discipline and destruction," Harper announced, her voice dropping an octave to carry undertones that made Damon's grip tighten involuntarily on his expensive scissors. Her feet positioned themselves shoulder-width apart, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, in a stance that screamed professional combat training to anyone who recognized the signs. Years of sparring had conditioned her to read opponents, and everything about Damon's body language revealed someone accustomed to psychological intimidation rather than actual physical confrontation. "Try me, bitch," Damon snarled, desperation replacing his earlier confidence as he realized the power dynamic had shifted beyond his understanding. He lunged forward with the scissors, expecting his size, advantage, and weapon to overwhelm the teacher who'd already absorbed more humiliation than any educator should endure. His movement lacked technique, relying on brute force and intimidation tactics that had worked against previous victims who possessed no means of defense. Harper sidestepped with dancer-like grace, her 8 years of training reducing Damon's attack to amateur-hour theatrics. Her right hand intercepted his wrist with precision that spoke of countless repetitions, applying pressure point control that made his fingers involuntarily release their grip. The expensive scissors clattered harmlessly to the linoleum floor as Harper demonstrated the difference between someone who talked about violence and someone who'd mastered it through disciplined study. 8 years of taekwondo. "Damon," Harper informed him as she maintained wrist control while stepping back to assess his next move. "Would you like to continue this conversation?" Her tone carried the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather rather than dismantling a privileged teenager's entire worldview. Outside the windows, student phones captured every moment as social media notifications began exploding across platforms worldwide. Damon stumbled backward, massaging his wrist while processing the reality that someone had finally demonstrated superior physical capability. His blue eyes, accustomed to seeing fear and submission, now reflected something, approaching panic, as he realized his father's influence meant nothing in a confrontation where skill trumped political connections. The scissors that had seemed like symbols of power now represented evidence of assault against someone demonstrably capable of self-defense. "You're dead," Damon screamed, desperation lending volume to threats that sounded increasingly hollow. "My father will destroy you. He's a federal judge. He owns this entire district." But his voice carried the hysteria of someone whose foundational beliefs were crumbling in real time. Federal judges couldn't reverse the laws of physics or cancel the muscle memory developed through years of dedicated training. Harper's patience had reached its limit. The hair assault represented more than physical attack. It was destruction of cultural heritage passed down through generations of strong women who'd faced adversity with dignity intact. Her grandmother's braiding pattern lay scattered across the floor, like evidence of institutional failure to protect educators from systematic harassment. The time for measured responses had passed. Now came the moment for consequences. Damon charged like an enraged bull, his movements telegraphed by emotion rather than guided by technique. Harper waited until he committed fully to his attack trajectory before executing the roundhouse kick that would become internet legend. Her supporting foot pivoted with perfect form, while her right leg chambered, then extended with all the power generated by years of conditioning and competition. The instep connected with Damon's solar plexus with surgical precision, not intended to cause permanent damage, but calculated to demonstrate absolute dominance. The impact sent Damon flying backward into the whiteboard with force that rattled mounted speakers and scattered magnetic poetry words like confetti. He crumpled to the floor, gasping desperately as his diaphragm spasmed from the perfectly executed technique. The kick had been textbook perfect: chamber, pivot, strike, follow-through, and reset, demonstrating years of training condensed into one devastating movement that left no doubt about the outcome of their confrontation. Outside the windows, student reactions ranged from shocked silence to explosive celebration as phones captured every angle of their untouchable bullies' complete defeat. Emma's live stream viewer count climbed past 10,000 as the footage spread across platforms faster than school administrators could react. Comments poured in from viewers worldwide who recognized they were witnessing something unprecedented: a teacher finally fighting back against systematic harassment with results that would reshape institutional dynamics forever. Harper stood over Damon's whimpering form, her breathing controlled, and even despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, "Get up," she commanded with authority that brooked no argument. "Face the class you thought you owned." Her voice carried the steel-edged confidence of someone who'd just proven their capabilities beyond any possible doubt, transforming from victim to victor in a confrontation that would define both their futures. The classroom door burst open as students flooded back inside, desperate to witness the aftermath of their biology teacher's legendary response to months of systematic harassment. They found Damon struggling to his feet, humiliated and defeated, while Harper collected her destroyed braids with dignity that somehow seemed enhanced rather than diminished by their destruction. The power structure that had dominated Roosevelt High School for years had shifted irrevocably in the span of 90 seconds. "This was my grandmother's braid pattern," Harper announced to the assembled students and live stream audience, holding up the severed hair like evidence in a trial where justice had finally been served. The cultural significance of the assault became clear to viewers who understood they'd witnessed more than a simple fight. This was destruction of heritage, met with consequences that would echo far beyond Roosevelt High School's walls. As Harper began teaching her lesson with destroyed hair and unshakable dignity, every student paid attention with intensity they'd never displayed before. In the back corner, Damon slouched in his seat, his empire of intimidation reduced to rubble by someone he'd catastrophically underestimated. Principal Hartley's approaching footsteps in the hallway signaled that the real battle was just beginning, but Harper Fleming had already won the war. Principal Janet Hartley arrived at room 237 with 2 security guards and a carefully practiced expression of administrative concern, expecting to find the usual aftermath of student misconduct that could be quietly managed through phone calls to influential parents. Instead, she discovered a classroom in perfect order except for blonde hair scattered across the floor and 28 students displaying unusual focus on their biology lesson. The teacher, who should have been rattled and seeking administrative protection, stood at the whiteboard explaining cellular respiration with unshakable composure. Emma Caldwell's Instagram live stream had exploded past 50,000 viewers as the Roundhouse kick footage spread across every major social media platform with viral velocity that defied algorithmic explanation. The hashtag Justice for Harper began trending nationally within 30 minutes, suggesting amplification by accounts with serious technological capabilities rather than organic grassroots support. Comments poured in from teachers worldwide, sharing their own harassment stories, creating a digital avalanche of institutional accountability demands. "There seems to have been an incident," Principal Hartley announced carefully, her words chosen to minimize legal liability while gathering information about the confrontation that was rapidly spiraling beyond her control. Damon sat slumped in the back corner, his designer clothes disheveled, and his usual arrogance replaced by something approaching shell shock. The expensive hairdressing scissors lay abandoned near Harper's desk like evidence of premeditated assault that had backfired spectacularly. Harper turned from the whiteboard where she'd been explaining photosynthesis with the same methodical precision she'd used to dismantle Damon's attack. "A student brought weapons to class and attempted to assault me," she replied with scientific accuracy that left no room for alternative narratives. "I defended myself using appropriate force while protecting other students from witnessing excessive violence. The security cameras captured everything." Her calm recitation of facts carried more authority than Hartley had ever heard from the mild-mannered teacher she'd dismissed as politically irrelevant. The lie about security cameras was calculated brilliance that revealed Harper's understanding of institutional politics. Room 237's surveillance system had mysteriously malfunctioned for months whenever incidents required documentation, but suggesting footage existed forced administrators to confront their own complicity in systematic cover-ups. Hartley's nervous glance toward the camera mount confirmed Harper's suspicion that technical difficulties occurred selectively when convenient for certain families. Outside Roosevelt High School, news vans began arriving, as national media outlets recognized the viral story's potential to ignite broader conversations about educational safety and institutional accountability. Parents flooded the parking lot, demanding explanations for their children's excited phone calls about witnessing their biology teacher destroy the school's most feared bully with techniques that belonged in martial arts competitions rather than academic settings. The carefully maintained facade of suburban educational excellence was cracking under unprecedented scrutiny. Police officers arrived to investigate Damon's assault allegations, but their interviews with student witnesses revealed a consistent narrative that supported Harper's self-defense claims. The professional scissors constituted weapons under state law, particularly when wielded with intent to harm during recorded threats. Detective Maria Santos, who'd been investigating Roosevelt High School's unusual pattern of teacher resignations for months, recognized this incident as the breakthrough she'd been waiting for to expose deeper institutional corruption. Judge Marcus Westbrook's emergency call to his personal attorney revealed the panic spreading through networks of influence that had protected his son's harassment campaign for years. Federal judges possessed considerable power within their jurisdictions, but viral videos reached audiences far beyond any single court's authority. The footage of Damon's humiliating defeat was being analyzed by martial arts experts who praised Harper's technique while condemning the assault that had triggered her response. Blake Henderson and Ryan Torres, facing potential charges as accessories to assault, began providing statements that contradicted their previous loyalty to Damon's leadership. The systematic harassment pattern involved coordination that elevated simple bullying to criminal conspiracy, with evidence trails that investigators were already following through social media archives and school disciplinary records. Emma's livestream had inadvertently documented months of coordinated attacks against multiple teachers. The trophy case in Roosevelt High School's main hallway had always seemed like a monument to athletic achievement, but Detective Santos's investigation revealed its true purpose as storage for blackmail material that ensured administrative compliance with harassment campaigns. Hidden compartments contained drives full of compromising footage, financial records documenting donation-based immunity, and correspondence between board members discussing the elimination of troublesome faculty through systematic psychological warfare. Student reactions to Harper's victory created a cultural earthquake that rippled throughout Roosevelt High School's social hierarchy. Teachers who'd spent years walking on eggshells around privileged students suddenly found courage to enforce classroom discipline without fear of political retaliation. The fear that had maintained artificial order through intimidation was being replaced by genuine respect for educators who'd proven they wouldn't tolerate systematic abuse, regardless of family influence or financial pressure. Social media analysis revealed the harassment pattern had claimed victims throughout the district, with identical resignation letters discovered in personnel files that suggested institutional coordination beyond random student misconduct. Harper's Roundhouse kick had provided the catalyst for investigations that were uncovering corruption networks spanning school boards, administrative offices, and political appointments that prioritized wealthy families over educational integrity and teacher safety. The viral video's impact extended far beyond Roosevelt High School as educators nationwide began sharing stories of harassment, intimidation, and institutional abandonment that had forced them to abandon careers they dedicated their lives to pursuing. Harper Fleming had accidentally become the symbol of resistance against systematic abuse that permeated educational institutions where money and influence trumped basic human dignity and professional respect. As evening approached, Harper sat in her Honda Civic with replacement tires, processing the transformation of her quiet teaching career into an international symbol of teacher empowerment. Her phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from major networks, speaking engagements from education conferences, and messages from martial arts organizations offering sponsorship deals that could change her financial situation permanently. The woman who'd struggled to afford groceries that morning was suddenly receiving opportunities that could secure her future indefinitely. But the real victory wasn't personal advancement. It was the knowledge that her response had shattered a system designed to protect predators while silencing victims. The investigation Detective Santos was conducting would reveal corruption extending far beyond teenage harassment into institutional networks that had operated without accountability for decades. Harper Fleming's roundhouse kick had triggered an avalanche that would reshape educational culture across multiple districts and possibly inspire legislative changes designed to protect teachers from systematic intimidation. The quiet biology teacher, who'd simply wanted to educate young minds, had accidentally started a revolution that would echo through American education for generations to come. 6 months after the roundhouse kick heard around the world, Harper Fleming stood before a congressional hearing room packed with representatives, education officials, and media crews broadcasting her testimony to millions of viewers. The woman who'd once struggled to afford groceries now commanded speaking fees that exceeded her entire teacher's salary, but she'd chosen to use her platform advocating for educator protection rather than personal enrichment. Her destroyed braids had grown back, but she now wore them in a style that honored both her grandmother's tradition and her newfound status as an education reform icon. The braid kick, as internet culture had dubbed her legendary technique, lived on through countless memes, martial arts tutorials, and pop culture references that elevated Harper's response into American folklore. Roosevelt High School had transformed from a cautionary tale of institutional corruption into a model program for harassment prevention, with Harper's former classroom converted into a mandatory stop on district tours, showcasing reform implementation. New teachers across the nation requested assignments specifically to work in environments where Harper Fleming had proven that educators could fight back and win. The congressional testimony revealed the true scope of corruption that Harper's kick had exposed through investigations spanning multiple states. Detective Santos's initial probe into Roosevelt High School had uncovered systematic harassment networks involving 17 school districts, 43 administrators, and 12 elected officials who'd weaponized educational institutions to maintain political power through intimidation and silence. The cost of settlements and legal fees had exceeded $12 million, bankrupting several school boards and triggering federal oversight of educational institutions nationwide. Individual action can trigger systemic change, Harper told the assembled lawmakers, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd transformed from victim to victor through decisive response to systematic abuse. When institutions fail to protect their educators, those educators must be prepared to protect themselves. But more importantly, we must create systems that make such protection unnecessary through accountability, transparency, and consequences for those who abuse their positions of power. The revelation that shocked even Harper came during the investigation's final phase, when Detective Santos uncovered the true architect of Roosevelt High School's harassment network. The systematic elimination of troublesome teachers hadn't been orchestrated by teenagers or their wealthy parents, but by school board member Patricia Henley, who'd coordinated attacks against educators who threatened her embezzlement schemes that had diverted over $2 million from educational resources into personal accounts over 8 years. Henley's arrest during a televised school board meeting created viral footage that rivaled Harper's original roundhouse kick for social media impact. The woman who'd appeared to champion educational excellence while privately orchestrating the destruction of dedicated teachers represented institutional corruption at its most cynical level. Her crimes had robbed students of quality education while traumatizing educators who devoted their careers to public service, creating ripple effects that had damaged communities throughout the district. Damon Westbrook's transformation from privileged bully to juvenile detention center inmate demonstrated that even federal judges couldn't shield their children from consequences when evidence was overwhelming and public attention was intense. His expulsion from Roosevelt High School preceded criminal charges that resulted in 18 months of supervised rehabilitation, community service requirements, and permanent prohibition from educational institutions receiving federal funding. The scissor assault that had seemed like teenage mischief was reclassified as aggravated assault with a weapon against a public employee. Judge Marcus Westbrook's resignation from the federal bench amid ethics investigations represented the most dramatic casualty of Harper's viral response to systematic harassment. The political network that had protected his son's criminal behavior unraveled under scrutiny that revealed decades of judicial corruption, involving case outcomes determined by financial contributions rather than legal merit. His lifetime appointment couldn't survive the constitutional crisis triggered by his family's assault on educational integrity and public trust. Emma Caldwell's live-stream footage had preserved evidence that proved crucial in prosecuting dozens of harassment cases while inspiring Harper's Law. State legislation requiring educational institutions to implement independent oversight boards with authority to investigate administrative misconduct without political interference. The teenager who'd intended to document Harper's humiliation had accidentally recorded evidence that transformed educational policy across multiple states and influenced federal guidelines for institutional accountability. Blake Henderson and Ryan Torres. After serving community service sentences that included tutoring struggling students under supervised conditions, had become unlikely advocates for anti-bullying programs that emphasized rehabilitation over punishment. Their transformation from enforcers of intimidation to counselors helping other students navigate social conflicts demonstrated the potential for systemic change when consequences included education rather than simple incarceration. Their former victim had insisted on restorative justice approaches that could break cycles of harassment rather than simply punishing individual incidents. Roosevelt High School's current principal, Dr. Michael Chen, implemented policies inspired by Harper's experience that had eliminated harassment incidents while improving academic performance across all demographic categories. The culture of fear that had maintained artificial order through intimidation was replaced by genuine respect for learning environments where students and teachers could focus on education rather than survival. Harper's former classroom had become an unofficial shrine where new educators learned about professional courage and institutional accountability. The ripple effects of Harper Fleming's 90-second response to systematic harassment continued expanding through American education long after her congressional testimony concluded. Teacher training programs now included self-defense courses alongside pedagogy instruction, recognizing that physical safety was prerequisite to intellectual growth. Education colleges nationwide required students to study Harper's case as an example of individual courage, triggering institutional reform through decisive action when systems failed to provide protection. 3 years after the incident, Harper received an email that brought her story full circle. Sarah Martinez, a first-year teacher facing harassment at a school in California, wrote to thank Harper for inspiring her to stand firm against administrative pressure to ignore systematic abuse. "Your kick didn't just silence one bully," Sarah wrote. "It gave all of us permission to fight back when fighting back was our only option for survival." International education systems began implementing Fleming protocols, comprehensive anti-harassment frameworks that prioritize teacher safety while maintaining student rights. Universities in 12 countries invited Harper to speak about institutional courage, recognizing her story's universal relevance beyond American educational contexts. The biology teacher who'd defended herself with a roundhouse kick had accidentally created a global movement that transcended cultural boundaries and inspired systemic reform across continents. Harper Fleming never intended to become a symbol of educational resistance when she braided her hair that October morning. She'd simply wanted to teach biology to students who deserved better than the corruption that had infected their learning environment. But sometimes, the most powerful transformations begin with individual decisions to stop accepting unacceptable behavior, regardless of the personal cost or institutional pressure to remain silent in the face of systematic abuse. Her grandmother's braiding pattern had been destroyed by scissors wielded with malicious intent, but the tradition lived on through Harper's example of dignified resistance that proved some things were worth fighting for when all other options had been exhausted. The quiet teacher who'd absorbed months of harassment had finally found her voice through a roundhouse kick that echoed through American education forever, reminding everyone that sometimes the most important lessons happened outside any textbook or curriculum guide. In the comments section of every video featuring Harper's legendary technique, teachers continue sharing their own stories of harassment survived and dignity preserved through courage borrowed from someone who proved that respect could be demanded when it wouldn't be given freely. The revolution that began with professional scissors cutting through braided hair had transformed into a movement that would protect educators for generations to come, inspiring countless others to stand tall when faced with impossible choices between dignity and survival. 5 years later, Harper's documentary, When Teachers Fight Back, premiered at Sundance Film Festival, featuring interviews with educators worldwide who'd found courage through her example. The film's proceeds funded scholarship programs for future teachers while establishing crisis intervention services for harassment victims. Her story had evolved from viral video sensation into educational policy cornerstone, proving that individual moments of courage could reshape entire institutional cultures when amplified through collective action and sustained commitment to justice. Today, Harper Fleming continues teaching biology at Roosevelt High School, where she serves as head of the newly established Teacher Safety and Dignity Department. Her classroom displays a framed photo of her grandmother's original braiding pattern, alongside testimonials from educators who've reclaimed their professional dignity through her example. The scissors that once threatened to destroy her career now rest in the school's museum as a reminder that sometimes the most transformative education happens when ordinary people refuse to accept extraordinary injustice as the price of public service. Her legacy extends beyond viral fame into tangible change that protects vulnerable educators nationwide. Every year on October 15th, Roosevelt High School celebrates Fleming Day, where students and teachers participate in workshops about respect, dignity, and institutional courage. Harper's roundhouse kick had become more than self-defense. It symbolized the moment when silence transformed into action, when dignity demanded justice, and when one teacher's refusal to accept abuse became a rallying cry for educational professionals who'd forgotten they deserved protection, respect, and the fundamental right to teach without fear of systematic harassment or institutional abandonment. Have you ever witnessed someone get exactly what they deserved? The comment sections across social media continue exploding, with educators sharing their own experiences of standing up to systematic abuse. Drop your story below because apparently, courage is contagious. And sometimes the most important lessons come from ordinary people who refuse to accept extraordinary injustice when institutional protection fails completely.